Good evening. Welcome to the third installment of the I-81 Speaker Series. Thank you all for being here. My name is Andrew Maxwell. I'm Director of the Syracuse-Onondaga County Planning Agency, or SOCPA. SOCPA is our joint city-county planning department, which was reconstituted just last summer in a new agreement between the City of Syracuse and Onondaga County. With important decisions facing our community, like what to do about the future of Route 81, you can imagine this is an exciting and challenging time to be a member of a joint city-county planning department. And I would suggest that it has never been more important for citizens to be fully engaged in such discussions, which is why we're here tonight. Mayor Stephanie Miner, County Executive Joni Mahoney, and New York State DOT Commissioner Joan McDonald agreed that the organization of this speaker series would help foster greater dialogue on the subject of Route 81 by bringing new perspectives and expert advice here from other communities. We want to thank all of you for choosing to be a part of this dialogue. We have an excellent speaker tonight who I know will lend great insight as we consider this important issue. He will speak for about 45 minutes, and then we will take questions from the audience for about another 25 minutes or so before concluding the program. To introduce our speaker this evening, I would like to welcome our Mayor, Stephanie Miner.
Thank you all very much. Most importantly, thank you for coming tonight. It is one of those very beautiful fall evenings that we in Central New York relish, and I know that it was somewhat of a decision to come inside tonight rather than to stay outside. But thank you for once again showing why you are such a progressive and thoughtful community and that you made that decision to come here tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. Peter J. Park is a city planner and educator that has led innovative practices for over 20 years. His integrated approach to comprehensive planning, urban design, and development review has created clear visions for sustainable urban development, places of high-quality design, and streamlined permitting processes. He has overseen preparation of numerous plans, comprehensive citywide zoning updates, and implementation, importantly, of major infrastructure and development projects. His focus is on the linkage between innovative planning and practical implementation strategies that has delivered lasting improvements in communities where he has worked. Peter is currently a visiting design critic in urban planning and design at the Harvard Graduate School of Design and an associate professor adjunct of urban design at the University of Colorado in Denver. Previously, he taught at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and coordinated the Joint Master of Architecture and Architecture Master of Urban Planning program. He has most recently authored Rethinking Highways in American Cities, New Opportunities for Leadership with the support of the CNU and the Ford Foundation, and prepared the foreword to The Life and Death of Urban Highways. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in welcoming Peter J. Park.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Andrew, and thank you all for coming tonight. I think I'll speak for about 45 minutes. If we're lucky, it'll be less than that. But I would like to share with you just some perspectives. I got here late last night. I'm not an expert on Syracuse. I'll tell you that right now. But I did get a chance to look around a little bit. I shot this picture for you this morning outside my hotel. That was a view from my room. But I'd like to share with you maybe some perspectives about these highways that are in our cities. Give you a little bit of background from a historical point of view. Not specifically Syracuse, but the story is probably the same across our country. And share with you some of the aspects of what we did in Milwaukee when we took out the Park East Freeway in downtown. So just to give you some background, I was the planning director in Milwaukee, and we had great things happening in that city in that time, and taking out this freeway. This is not building a freeway, this is what it looks like when you remove it, the process of removal. And much of the work in that city, which had not been growing, was turning it around and building it on its urban strengths and removing the impediments to progress from past generations. Denver, I was the planning director for about 8 years there. It's a very different kind of city, one that grew up very much originally around streetcar and trolley, but then significantly influenced by highways and cars. And today, much of our work was reorienting the city, because it is a city that's growing significantly, and planning with a more broad point of view about transportation that included bikes and expansion of our transit system, light rail, commuter rail, bus rapid transit, as well as implementation of a number of share car programs and share bike programs. So these are great American cities, and they have great legacies of architecture. They both have an incredible system of parks that were organized around the City Beautiful movement. The influence of the City Beautiful movement is pretty significant in those cities, as is in your city. And great neighborhoods. Great neighborhoods that are very diverse and were built around the streetcar and trolley. And they made and maintained really wonderful urban neighborhoods, very walkable urban neighborhoods. And much of the work in Milwaukee and in Denver was finding ways to create those kind of environments, those kind of places that offer much diversity of use, different ranges of affordability, and very comfortable and desirable places to walk, and interesting destinations to walk to. Because much of the fabric in downtown Milwaukee was destroyed under urban renewal, much of our work is really reweaving the urban fabric of the city. And in Denver, as I mentioned, there is that, but it's also a pretty significant amount of work in planning new areas that, for example, in the foreground is the former Stapleton Airport site, which is growing up as a new mixed-use community, as well as other greenfield sites on the edges of the city. So this is a picture of Barcelona, one of the boulevards in Barcelona. And it shows to me a really wonderful idea that I'll be showing you another version of this. But it shows you an idea about making a city for people. Sure, that's a grand street. Sure, there's a lot of traffic that goes on that street. But it was originally designed for people, and it still is maintained as a place for people. This is why we make cities. The interaction of human beings, the opportunities of creating economic exchange and cultural and social exchange are what cities are about. And ultimately, we don't plan for things, we plan for people. And if we do that, we end up with really great places that people want to be. And one of the challenges that we've had, and you have really wonderful places here as well. One of the things that makes cities is that you have a lot of choices. Choices about how you move around, choices about things you can do, because the city isn't wired for one thing. It's wired for walking and transit, for bicycles. And this is where I think this question about I-81 starts, in how I would recommend you thinking about it. Because if you have the conversation about what to do about the highway, and it's about the highway, then you have a very narrow definition of a problem and a very narrow set of options. I think there is an opportunity to expand what this conversation is about. So I showed you some pictures of great people places. These are the great car places that I found in all of my research. Right? So this proves that if you just keep adding lanes to a highway, when it gets congested, you will solve the problem of congestion. You won't have the problem. It goes away. Right? In fact, it doesn't go away. And really, what I think these conversations need to be about is how do we add choices versus trying to solve for congestion. Congestion is one of the major reasons why these highway projects and road projects are rationalized, right? Safety improvements. If we spend this money, we'll get a safer road. We'll reduce crashes, we'll reduce fatalities, and we'll reduce congestion. Some safety improvements certainly work, but expanding the capacity of the roads does not solve for congestion, right? Unless you overspend and create significant excessive capacity. That's one way, costly, but one way. The other way is to have your economic development staff do everything they can do to chase jobs out of the city and the region, and then you won't have a traffic problem. But I don't think most people think about that. I'm pretty sure your mayor and county executive will think that way. So we've tried this in this country. Other countries have tried it, and it just, thinking singularly about this question about what to do with traffic, it's just not enough. So a friend of mine, who's an engineer, Ian Lockwood, drew this cartoon comparing sort of the capacity of the street, the way that some people define what a street is for. Traffic. But if you think about the capacity of a street to serve traffic and pedestrians and bikes and encourage land use and people, you have a more complete thought. You have a much more rich point of view and perspective of making a city. So I think the opportunity here, and as I understand what the speaker series has been about, and what these discussions have been about, is about the aspiration of what you all hope for in terms of your future and what you see and what you want to see happen in your city. Given a choice, most people in neighborhoods would not choose to have a freeway cut through their neighborhood. I think, right? Who in this audience, raise your hand please, would like a freeway of at least 4 lanes and elevated or in a cut passing through your neighborhood? Who wants that? Right, so if you had a choice, you probably wouldn't do it. For example, this person's porch, when they went out on their porch when there was a street, I think it might have been a little bit more enjoyable than it is today next to this freeway. Right? So given the choice, we wouldn't do such a thing. But there is a history to this, and the way that we even have conversations and study these projects today, that I think is worth talking about. So I'll talk a little bit about what I describe as historically in the US, what really was a campaign to build freeways to solve a lot of Americans' problems. But I would describe it as actually one of our failed experiments, and I'll describe what I mean by that. And then share with you maybe some ideas for consideration that might be opportunities for your city. In 1922, Henry Ford said, "We'll solve the problem of the city by leaving the city." Awesome strategy. Worked really well for Detroit, for example. Right? The idea of leaving your problems behind, well, I just don't understand what this even means. But at the same time, there were folks like Werner Hegemann and Albert Peets, who had their offices in Milwaukee, Hegemon, I think, actually made a report for Syracuse on some of his travels in the early 1900s. It's a pretty interesting report. But they were advocating a different point of view. So, for example, this is a drawing from 1909 in Milwaukee, imagining what the future of Milwaukee might be. So, a city growing by extension of the street system. A street system that has a streetcar trolley, has roads for cars, has a generous sidewalk, is planted in such a beautiful way that one would want to have their address on that street. Right? It's a value capture proposition. It's the notion of not spending our taxpayer money, but actually investing our taxpayer money in ways that creates value long term. Right? Today, the discussion about what to do with a road is primarily shaped by how many cars do we project will be going through this point per day, right, in the future. Rather than what kind of places do we want to make, what kind of cities do we want to live in, what kind of opportunities do we want to create. Now, in the 1920s, an architect, famous architect and planner, Le Corbusier, did these drawings and these diagrams imagining what the future city would be. He was embracing technology, you know, cars, fast, right? In 1924, I don't know how fast a car could go in 1924, but it must have felt fast. But he drew these kind of diagrams, imagining what future cities might be, right? Tall towers, these expansive roadways without congestion, high-moving cars, fast-moving cars. And we actually built these diagrams, right? But this is actually the reality of how they typically perform, oftentimes. And it's actually by design that that happens in cities. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there were these influences in the early part of the last century that actually are pretty significant in how they shaped what we're dealing with today. And I think revealed to us some opportunities. This is downtown Denver in 1961, a lot of buildings. By 1975, urban renewal had renewed the city by demolishing blocks and blocks of buildings to create service parking lots. Incredible landscape that it left. Right? So, would we do this sort of program again? Would we really think that this is a good idea? I don't think so, and nor do we have the money to do it. But when I look at these situations, I think, well, that's a land bank today. Right? That's where new development is going to happen someday. But the question is, are we prepared for it? Are we planning for it? Are we entertaining the conversation with our community about what we aspire to? So these things about the we, right, are really important. In the early days of what Ford was talking about, obviously he was interested in selling Fords, but and creating jobs. But there was a lot wrapped up in the politics and business in our country. I don't think that's changed a great deal, but it had a significant impact on just policies and how we make cities. So that in the mid-50s, Henry Ford and a number of other major players in the automobile industry advocated as part of a major campaign to build out the highway system, the interstate system in the United States. And it's a very powerful campaign built on this notion of freedom and prosperity, which, you know, in America, those are pretty good themes to work from. So I'm going to show you a little clip of the plea that Henry Ford II makes as part of a promotional video to get political support, to get the people of the country to help the experts, the expert traffic engineers and planners to build out this interstate system for us, and this highway system. And you'll see how powerful, I mean, when I watched this first time, I was thinking, yeah, let's build some highways. It becomes almost like an imperative, a civic responsibility.
I am Henry Ford II. In recent years, there has been a lot of talk about our highway situation. So much has been said But I feel sure a great many of you must have wondered, as I did, whether there was anything a private citizen could do about a problem so big. That's why we decided to study the situation. The results are published in this book. We call it Freedom of the American Road, simply because we Americans always have liked plenty of elbow room, freedom to come and go as we please in this big country of ours. The first thing we found was that you can't talk about highways without talking about traffic and safe driving too. We found that there are many experienced highway and traffic safety experts who are doing a great service to the public. What they need is public understanding and support. But the most important thing we discovered was that already many private citizens in states and communities across the nation have gotten together to tackle their local problems with real success. We present a few of their stories in this motion picture. We do so with pride, for here, it seems to me, is real democracy in action. And now for a first-hand report, let's go to our Traffic Safety and Highway Improvement Department and our reporter, Westbrook Van Voorhees.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. For our first story on what a community did about a dangerous local highway situation, we take you to fast-growing California, where highway problems have multiplied with the increase of population and of travel. This is San Francisco.
So he goes on to talk about San Francisco, a number of other cities that ordinary citizens have organized to help forward progress and solve this problem. Several other companies made other sorts of promotional films. Here's one, Give Yourself the Green Light, that General Motors.
Time-saving superhighways, Futurama's free-flowing channels of concrete and steel. But these wide lanes of reality actually measure out to just a few miles scattered far apart across the friendly face of our land. We have become the nation on wheels, with more motorized mobility than ever dreamed of before. Though we have the greatest highway system in all the world, it can't carry the mounting traffic of our growing greatness. We're running out of roads. We didn't dream big enough.
Here's the problem, all mapped out. 3,300,000 miles of it.
So these sort of films were available and shown and helped really convince folks that, you know, it's kind of your patriotic responsibility to be supportive of this. This is going to make our country great. We're growing. Growth is always good. And we just need to make the roads bigger and then we won't have congestion. But we know the reality is not true at all. But this notion of freedom is still, it still persists today. I mean, the All-America Freedom Fest, freedom of choice. You can buy a small car, you can buy an SUV, you can buy, you can lease. It's awesome, the choices you have available to you. These are very powerful messages, right? And they persist today. But when Eisenhower signed the Highway Act in the mid-50s, he understood that highways should not cut through the city, right? They were to connect between cities, but by actually local politics, typically, these highways were cut through neighborhoods and cities. Now, while I talk about taking freeways out, I want to make it clear that I'm not against the interstate highway, right? I understand we need it. And I'm not against cars. I'm very interested in car design. But I'm also for urbanism and what makes cities work. And I think this is one of those examples where there's no doubt we need to have a highway system. But when it comes to cities, they're just simply not quite the right design. And I'll describe this in terms of an experiment that we tried with an automated, auto-based vehicle, but it didn't really serve us well. We have landscapes that look like this, adjacent to freeways. I did an interview standing right here today. It was not a picturesque spot, but it worked, I think, for the purpose of the interview. This is this as a piece of engineering is totally peculiar to put a bus shelter underneath the cover of the freeway. You definitely will not get wet if it's raining. You know, this is someone's neighborhood. Yeah, of course she's got a headache because she's in the auto zone. But this is where we are. We can make smart cars, but we still have these dumb places, right? And we have choices today about what to do about them. But we have to entertain the conversation and be willing to widen our point of view. It's actually a simple design issue that I think causes great separated, very limited access highways from working in a city. This, as a limited access highway, makes perfect sense, right? When you have another highway crossing it, or you have a county highway or railroad track or bridge, like this is a good idea to connect between cities, and that's when it works. But a number of folks from way back understood that building a highway has about the same result upon vegetation and human structures as the passage of a tornado. So that was Louis Mumford, right? An expert, a planner, a world-famous planner. But then Jane Jacobs, who's not an expert planner or engineer, she understood that frequent streets and short blocks are valuable because the fabric of intricate cross-use that they will permit among the users of the city neighborhood. So the unit of measure is the neighborhood and people. And the idea that a fine-grained network of blocks makes sense. This is a drawing from a book that Norman Belgedis did, talking about the magic motorway, explaining how the freeway system would work. So this would be the future motorway, the interstate highway. You would get off of it, get onto a system of roads that would then distribute to the existing city grid. Right? Someone thought it would be better if we just skip that and just cut the freeway through. Right? So it wasn't the original design. And it's actually one of the major causes of why these fail. Limited access, right, by definition, is contrary to what cities are about. Cities, from the very first settlements, have been about access, and they've been about exchange. Economic exchange, social exchange, cultural exchange. This is what makes civilizations. So you have to be able to get there, obviously. But when you have a limited access design of a road that is cutting into the fine-grained network of a city, you choke off the capacity of the city. And you actually create congestion. I know that doesn't sound right, but here's sort of, this is related to it. It's same number of lanes going north-south, 4. Same number of lanes going east-west, 6. Now you could either put those in 3 streets with 2 lanes each, right? 2 lanes each. This actually performs, from a traffic movement point of view, this performs superior to this, even though it's the same number of lanes, right? And it has more porosity, and these streets would be easier to cross, and a whole number of things that just perform better than doing a limited access road. So when I took this picture early this morning, I saw a lot of capacity up in the air. I saw a lot of capacity on the ground. Cars started stacking up here because I think there's an exit ramp just south of where my hotel is. So this is what I mean. The limited access highway in the city, right, that has a rich network, creates congestion because everyone is trying to get off at the same place or get on, right? So it induces more congestion. But also what happens, like let's say I wanted to go here, I have to go past my destination, get off on the ramp and come back to get to where I wanted to be, because I couldn't do that, right, because it's limited access. And again, this just induces more travel in downtown because everyone's driving further than they needed to go, right? They drive past their destination and then have to come back on the city street. So if you take that and you just multiply that over and over again, you get these moments of congestion. A super large road, but it can't perform the way that it performs as it crosses the U.S. across a rural land. So it's simply a design flaw. This is the Marquette Interchange in Milwaukee. It's a marvel of engineering. But you can see what it did for land value, for acres and acres of downtown real estate. And it was rebuilt, believe it or not. I love this. This is how smart planners can be. It'll be $5.5 billion. We'll have to buy and move a cemetery and add 576 acres of land. And by 2020, traffic will be more jammed than ever. Isn't that an awesome investment? Right? Isn't this exactly what you want your stock portfolio to do in 20 years? Is be worth less to you than it is today? Right? If we know this, why would we spend that money? Why wouldn't we look for other solutions? Because clearly we've already predicted we'll have congestion in the future. Well, okay then, we better start spending that money. It's a question of looking at what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I think there's some opportunities for Syracuse with this kind of examination. There are cities all over the world that have taken freeways out. Right? San Francisco, for example, this freeway, double-decker freeway, was damaged in an earthquake at the waterfront. They didn't rebuild it. They built a beautiful boulevard. And the waterfront is an amazing place, and real estate values have increased, and it's an incredible destination for both tourists and residents of the Bay Area. So where did the cars go? Did like everybody suddenly just decide that they weren't going to drive anymore? No, not at all. The cars found other routes. People are actually pretty smart. They figure out where to go. And the imposition of this structure on the waterfront held back the potential of what that waterfront could be. And now the ferry terminal was an amazing place, and it doesn't have a freeway. And that freeway carried a lot of traffic. The West Side Highway in New York City. It was broken, right? A dump truck, I think it was actually supposed to be repairing the road. A dump truck broke through the deck, and it stood for years and years before they decided what to do about it. They decided to take it down, make a boulevard, which has a bike lane. It's perfectly crossable. There's a school there. There's new development happening. In New York City, right? So there's, I think, 140,000 cars a day that used to go here. Where did they go? Did they just evaporate? Did New York City lose a bunch of population and lose a bunch of businesses because the freeway was removed? No. In Seoul, Korea, this is the Cheonggyecheon River, which had a covered over river and a freeway on top of it. A guy ran on the platform of taking the freeway out. He ran for mayor. He became mayor. They took it out. They cleaned up the river. They created a river revitalization and cleanup campaign across Korea. They took out another freeway in downtown. And then he became president of South Korea. So it isn't necessarily political suicide to advocate for taking freeways down. You might actually be successful in other offices too. But it's completely changed the dynamic of the real estate in this section of the city. Billions of dollars in new investment, and people came. It got better. There's no example that I can think of where a neighborhood got better when a freeway was cut through it. I can't find one. I've looked. If you know of a neighborhood that got better when the freeway was cut through it, please send me a picture. But every single case where a freeway came out of the city, everything got better. Right? It wasn't Carmageddon. It didn't result in completely, congested streets. In fact, access gets improved if you do it correctly. You can read about this stuff. The Institute for Transportation Development Policy, ITDP, did this report, and they featured 5 cities that took freeways out, or in the case of Bogota, Colombia, they didn't build, they chose not to build a freeway. And they built instead a transit bike system. And this report also looks at cities around the world that are currently considering or have taken out freeways, so you can download this report from the website. The Congress for the New Urbanism also has something called Highways to Boulevards Initiative. I wrote a little white paper for them, Rethinking Highways in American Cities. You can download these reports as well. So it's not a new thing at all. It may seem really bold, it may seem very progressive, but a lot of cities have already done this, and they got better. And they were removing facilities or replacing facilities with just a different design in places that carried a tremendous amount of traffic. So let me share with you a little bit about what happened in Milwaukee. In the early 60s, this drawing for downtown Milwaukee was made. And it said, today's many projects will build an exciting downtown Milwaukee by 1970. The project was, these exciting projects were the Marquette Interchange, the Juneau Interchange, these marvels of engineering. And the belief was that that was going to help make downtown a vibrant, vital place. Actually, the opposite happened completely. In fact, so here's I-43. I-94, and this freeway was supposed to loop around. Here's the lakefront of Milwaukee. In this area is the Civic Center, an ensemble of City Beautiful buildings, the county courthouse, a number of other buildings around this urban square. There's a boulevard that used to terminate on this. You have a lot of these kind of beautiful compositions. So on access, there was this condition. And what happened is, in the design of the freeway system, they basically removed the park and created 3 layers of parking. So they just added ing to park, and then it becomes purposeful, I guess. But the problem is at 6th Street, if you're not paying attention and you cross the light, you will be on your way to the Upper Peninsula, right? You're on I-43, and you have to come back, you have to figure out how to get off I-43 and come back in. But what happened is these streets ended up being long on and off ramps to feed the freeway system. And again, when there's only a few ways on and off, those streets are the ones that get congested, right? So, and this is the backside of that courthouse. It almost looks like a cartoon, doesn't it? Like, haha, funny. No, that was actually a proposal. And this is I-43. So it's completely ironic when I look at this picture of this neoclassical architecture expressing democracy in a public building that the public can't get to, right? And it's choked off by all these freeway lines. There was a proposal that was stopped by neighborhood opposition that was supposed to go along the lakefront of Lake Michigan. If you know the movie The Blues Brothers, this is where Jake and Elle would fly off the end. Because that stood as a stub end in the sky for many years. It's actually not that tall from what you might recall from the movie, but this is a beautiful lagoon, and the proposal was to build this freeway across the lakefront. Luckily, that didn't happen. There's the Color Trova Museum on the lakefront in Milwaukee, and about this time of year, it starts to look like that. So it didn't happen because of local opposition, and the city did pretty well. It wasn't a problem, but where this freeway stood, you can see not much happened for many years. So this is the Park East Freeway. It's just under a mile long, and that's the section that we took out. But you can see that when it was there, it was like that picture I showed you of 81. There's incredible redundancy in road capacity. This is on a Monday morning. Enormous capacity on the ground and up in the sky. The highest and best use is cheap parking under the freeway because nothing else wants to be there or things can barely even grow there. And it became a significant barrier between downtown and public housing development at Hillside, just a couple blocks to the north. And if you lived there and you worked downtown, this would be your experience walking to work. And when you're up on the freeway, you don't even know that the Milwaukee River is going by. When you're down at the river level, you sort of see surface parking lots draining into the river, right? Like this is the height of the civilized world. You know, this is like one of our greatest achievements to figure out how to have a surface parking lot with cars dripping oil directly into a river. It's just awesome, right? Incredibly sophisticated. But you can also see what the freeway did to the adjacent building. This building became dilapidated. It's a beautiful building, but all the windows were broken out and it was just deteriorating, as was all of the condition of the land. And you see this kind of green space, but not really green space. But it takes a whole block for that freeway to touch down. So my students at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I had them study this. We built a model and then I had them remove that freeway and imagine and study what could happen if you took the freeway out and you replaced it with grand boulevards. You get a lot of land and you get the opportunity to reconnect neighborhoods that were split. And you have the chance to improve the condition. So when we did the downtown plan in Milwaukee in the late 90s, the removal of this freeway was imagined, and we did these renderings showing what could potentially happen here. And this helped people understand what the opportunity was. It wasn't about what do we do if the highway should go up or go down, take it down, right? It was about what should the city become? What do we aspire to? What can we hope we can make in terms of more robust, interesting development that obviously has cars, but also has great places and great opportunity for creating investment. So here's what I was saying earlier. There were pretty much only 3 ways on and off this freeway, which meant that if I wanted to go here, you know, I'm getting off here and I have to backtrack, or if I wanted to go over here, I have to get off here and backtrack. So that just is inducing more travel in downtown. If I could just get off right there, I could just turn and go to my destination. So this limited access highway in a street grid doesn't work. We did a plan, re-stitched the streets and blocks together, and we organized the new boulevard east-west and new boulevard north-south, extension of the successful Riverwalk in Milwaukee, and created new urban squares, parks, and green space. So the freeway actually used to sort of fly over here. This is during the demolition, but this is all the land that gets created. And we did renderings of what could potentially happen there. The freeway wasn't there. The drip line of the freeway used to be here. That's the new boulevard as it was being constructed. And we did these drawings of what might happen in terms of the new urban square. Or in this, there's a freeway getting ground up. The drip line of the freeway used to be about here. And we showed folks to help imagine what kind of new buildings, what kind of new activities could happen on these streets that they're very familiar with. So taking down the freeway, right, gave us the opportunity to create a new gateway to downtown from I-43 and from neighborhoods to the northwest. It gave us the chance to actually improve access. We take the freeway out and you improve access. I know it doesn't sound right, does it? But that's what happens. So we improve access, and we create a lot of new land for new development to happen, which creates new opportunities for investment, for people to work, to live, to shop. And it makes land now useful compared to depressed as it used to be. So you go from that to changing the character of the riverfront to great places that people want to be. And you can get there by boat, you can get there by car, by bike, by walking. And for a city, a Midwestern cold climate city like Milwaukee, a legacy city, to have the newspaper talk about downtown offers an escape from suburbia is a pretty big deal. That's not a bad thing, I don't think. And so today there are a whole number of projects. It's by no means done, right? I mean, I don't wish that the Park East would develop quickly. I think it would be better if it just goes at about the pace it is. But there does continue to be new housing, which brings new population, in this development they're putting in a new grocery store, which just makes living downtown even better. But none of this development would have happened if the freeway was still standing there. So I just want to conclude with this idea of civic will. I do think that our freeway experiment, we tried it and it proved to fail us. When we need freeways, when we need that access the most is when they perform the worst. But I think the whole campaign, the whole installation of these infrastructures in cities proved that there's enormous change can happen when we have political leadership and the will to do these things. Willingness to think, willingness to look at what we've succeeded at in the past and what we've failed at. And we also have certain realities. We have a huge challenge overall in our country of dealing with our infrastructure. We have bridges that cross rivers, we have other roads in outstate parts and rural parts of our country that need attention. And they might be critical links along our interstate system. But we got to find ways to fix them. And there are a number of people who are thinking about this, and thinking about the future and the importance of this infrastructure. But one of the challenges is we have government looking for new ways to pay for our roads and our bridges, which is fine. But there's also the possibility that we can rethink how we spend the money that we do have. So rather than just thinking about how to generate more revenue to pay for the thing, maybe we can rethink that nearly mile of freeway in Milwaukee that was taken out. The state and the Fed no longer have to subsidize and pay for its maintenance. It became a city of Milwaukee Street, and it created the opportunity for new development to happen. So, in terms of our overall priorities, I think how we use our tax dollars for infrastructure and for transportation ought to be really considered beyond just replacing what we did before. It takes leadership, and at the local level, this is, I think, where it's going to happen. Because the whole process of planning and design for highways in the federal system will never get you to removing the highway. The process, even the NEPA process, is not designed to remove a highway. Everything is designed to mitigate the impact. Well, one way to mitigate impact is just not do the thing that's causing the impact, right? Whoever's, wow, that's interesting. But the process really is not built that way. Because in the scoping process and the purpose and need process, the conversation is about the highway. It's about the accommodation for the vehicles. It's not about building the city, right? And so that's obviously where mayors and county executives and local level leaders will lead the charge on this. The federal government is not going to, states are not going to do it. But at the same time, I think that's where the real opportunity lies. You know, as a country, we do respond to crises a lot. I don't remember, several years ago there were these wildfires in Texas. And for the New York Times article, I remember seeing, you know, they took this picture, but it's really the top quarter that you actually see the topic of the picture, which is smoke. But this view, to me, was actually the bigger emergency. It's what some people describe as the long emergency, right? That, sure, we can figure out how to harness our resources to deal with major threats and catastrophic events. But we go on every single day, continue to do the things that also are equally threatening over the long term. So Harley-Davidson was a key player in Milwaukee in the removal of the freeway, which is a little ironic if you think about it. But it was really their interest in what had been contemplated in the downtown plan and their interest in the site that was identified that would require removing the freeway that helped us get the state DOT to support removing the Park East Freeway. Right? Up to that point, the governor of Wisconsin hated the idea. Every time Norquist, who was mayor at the time, mentioned taking freeways out, Governor Thompson would, it was just not a good situation. But when Harley-Davidson said they really liked that site in Milwaukee and we need some help, suddenly the state of Wisconsin was just completely cooperative and happy to remove freeway. So one of the things about this is while there's a lot of calculations and science and engineering technique, these questions are not technical, I don't think. It's a question of political will on the part of the community. What do you want? What can you imagine you might have in your future? And if, you know, the configuration that you got, you think that's the best you can do, you should just build it because that's what we know. Then I think just be prepared for the same result that you had before. You know, Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You're not going to get there. You're just going to get more of the same. And if that's the future that you want, okay. But you do have the opportunity, I think, today. And you wouldn't be the first one doing it. So, I mean, it'd be progressive, but you wouldn't be the only ones. And that's sometimes good. It's sometimes good to go second, third, fourth. So I believe in this notion of freedom and prosperity, but we simply need a different route. We need to recognize and accept and learn from the failures of the past that didn't work. And our economic challenge today actually, I think, provides the opportunity. We have to, I don't know if it was Chamberlain or Churchill who's quoted as saying something like, "Gentlemen, we're all out of money. Now we have to think." And, you know, there's something to say about thinking from an investment point of view and being smart about it. I do think where you are in your process, and it sounds the way the conversations have gone here, that there's a significant opportunity for your city, your region, your state to be a leader on this transportation reform. And now is the perfect time. This is not the US, this is in Mumbai, India, okay? I'm just showing you this because when I went to India, I saw these flyovers, and I saw a lot of flyovers being built. I also went to the slums of Mumbai, where, you know, there's one toilet for every 1,700 people. And these are all sort of pirated water lines. And yet the priority is to build, when something like less than 7% of the population owns a car in this city, 85% of the infrastructure is going into building these flyovers. So it's an aspiration. And I saw these structures, I couldn't tell if these were a freeway that used to be there that they took out, or it's a freeway that they're building. In Seoul, Korea, they left a few of these T sections as a reminder of what used to be there. Sort of interesting. But in India, this is happening. India is a big country. They're selling a lot of cars, and you see road signs like this all the time. And the text on that says, finally a car that will change the landscape of India. That's true, it will, if they copy what we've done in the US, right? But it's almost like, not only do I think India can't afford to do that, the rest of the world can't afford for India and China to do that. And so, to the extent that we're able to find opportunities where we can take a different path, under this, right, all the same aspirations, but a different design format, I think we can get closer to understanding how we make better futures. And we need to think about how we shape the physical composition of our cities. Has a lot to do with the people that we become and the places that we make. But I'll go back to where I began, which is we really make cities and we design and should be investing in infrastructure in ways that make better places for people. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much for that very thoughtful presentation. I'm sure everyone's minds are racing. We are going to take about 20 to 25 minutes for some Q&A from the audience. If I can locate our microphones here, we'll answer some questions. So I hope you have some.
Thank you for the presentation. Regarding the changes that were done in Milwaukee, no one would argue with you that you wouldn't want to be living next to an elevated highway. That's completely understandable. But in the case of what we're looking at now, interstates also created opportunities for investment by helping people, by increasing land values in the vicinity of property external to the city. In our case, do you have any examples in the Milwaukee process where people who were not part of the downtown city fabric that had investment interests in the continuation or the existence of that highway, and how those questions were addressed by people who were invested in the continuation of the highway for those reasons?
Sure. It's not an easy thing to do to convince people to change from what we've done in the past. I get that. And so the questions about removing the highway were like, well, where will the cars go, right? We'll have all kinds of congestion. My employees are going to be late for work, right? How are they going to get into downtown from where they live in the suburban parts of the city? So I think the important part of that conversation for us was emphasizing that we're not taking away access, right? We're not removing the freeway and vacating the street and making a big cul-de-sac out of freeway, right? The access, you still can go through. And I think when people begin to see that in some of the kind of images that I showed you, it's not a problem. It's, as I said, by ventilating the street network and getting people connected into the grid sooner, you actually improve